Now, you mentioned earlier that so much information, and I love that when you talked about your journey before we got to know you, that you'd sort of started even sort of thinking, I just want to buy an apartment because, we don't have kids yet, we're having a great life. And then it was like rent vesting. I know, we just buy an investment. And then it was like California bungalow. Oh, yeah, starry-eyed about, what you want to own. And then the reality check of, oh, come to Jesus moment, I can't afford that. And then, I don't know, we'll go the easy route. Let's just buy something that's easy. Right, sweet.
Psychotic.
What was that?
We sound psychotic when you say that. Like, I mean, this way.
That is such a regular journey for people to go through, believe
me.
It's
we call it ping-ponging all over the place. It's really common, and it's not just first-home buyers that do this. This is in our businesses. Megan and I would deal with couples that are upgrading and do the same thing. All the different, and then the classic
regardless of their budget.
Exactly, and like you say about the $3 million is absolutely spot on. Right? What I love is when they seem to extinguish all other options, and then the next thing they go, I know, I'll buy something and I'll knock it down and rebuild, as if that's the easy out, the easy way. It just typifies how hard the whole thing really is. But through all of that, did you ever suffer from information overload?
I think there's a lot of information, but not a lot of practical information. So our issue was we had information overload with stuff that was kind of irrelevant to buying a house. Like we were like macroeconomics. Like, why were we even we were sitting there reading newspapers about what's happening in the economy and all this stuff that actually, fundamentally buying a house, sure, it's nice to have a little bit of knowledge about that, but that wasn't going to help us buy a house. And so there's so much of that, but actually practical information about this is what a conveyancer does. This is when you should call a conveyancer. How weird is that process going to be when you do it? There was nothing like that out there for us. So yes, there was heaps of information, but valuable information was quite hard to find. Did you find that, Mike?
100%. Yeah. Look, I think for me, it was there seems seemingly every day in the papers you'd be reading an article, and the one article is, the housing crash that's going to happen, and I'm like, yes, and then the next article is
I'm one of the only people in Australia to rejoice at that news.
Yeah, I think most first home buyers sort of fit into that sort of disgruntled category where we all just think, it's all unfair, and we sort of throw our hands up in the air and it's all too hard and all of that sort of thing. And I certainly put my hand up in that category, well, at least initially. But what the point I was trying to make is that you end up in a situation where you're reading one article, which is, housing crash here. The next one's housing boom. Prices are going up by 25% this year or whatever. And so you end up getting into these, economic sort of discussions and financial stability discussions and all of this sort of thing, which isn't really conducive to just figuring out, hey, listen, can we afford a house? Should we buy a house? And if so, when? And how can we make that happen? So, yeah, I sort of I spent a lot of my time, in that, housing bear camp, ranting and raving about the fairness thing rather than focusing on the practicalities.